There are quite a lot of bad games out there, and big companies just keep pushing out even worse, rushed, lackluster games constantly. But there has to be a bottom to this seemingly endless pit. Something has to take the cake for being the worst game of all time. And that crowning achievement goes to E.T. the Extraterrestrial, released by Atari in 1982. A game so bad that even 30 years after its release, it's still considered the worst game of all time, and not even something as garbage as Fallout 76 can rip it off its title. E.T. the Extraterrestrial was a game released for the Atari 2600 console all the way back in 1982. Even though it's such a badly received game, it did leave the gaming industry with one thing: highly rushed cash grabs that barely work and practically just leech off the success of the franchise that they're based on, with the sole purpose of generating as much money as possible before eventually dying out quicker than Biden's ability to form a sentence.
America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was in the foothills of the Himalayas.
Although in this case, this heavily backfired and ended up driving Atari to bankruptcy. But why was ET such a bad game, and how did this end up happening? After all, Atari were the biggest game developers back in the 80s. ET was one of the most successful movie franchises of the time, and they had their best developer as the lead developer of the project. The problems start as soon as the work on the game started. Christmas was coming up and Atari wanted to tap into as much of that sweet holiday season sales as possible. And what better way to do that than release a game about one of the most beloved franchises of that time? The only problem was that the holiday season was less than 6 weeks away, so that was exactly the time given by Atari to the developers to make the complete game. 5 weeks. Now, if you know anything about video game development, 5 weeks isn't enough time to make a complete working game. It isn't enough today, and it wasn't enough 30 years ago. Needless to say that when the game was released, it was filled to the brim with bugs and game-breaking glitches, and it just lacked the polish of a finished game. The maze-like layout of the game was just downright frustrating to navigate. There were bugs that would unintentionally let players clip through objects and obstacles, which would in turn lead to more bugs and glitches and breaking of the sequence of the game, making the already frustrating game even more frustrating. And if that wasn't enough, there were common glitches that could make people freeze in one place or keep crashing the game, forcing a complete restart of the game. Added to the mix of extremely frustrating gameplay was the incredibly hard difficulty that made the game unplayable for most people. Oh, and did I mention the unclear objectives in the game that made it hard to figure out what you even needed to do in the first place? It was pretty evident on release that the game was nowhere near finished, and unsurprisingly, people were not happy. The ET movies, as I said before, were a very loved franchise at that time, so naturally, people had high hopes for the game. But a game built on such a short notice could just simply not live up to the expectations of the people. It actually did quite well in the first month of its release, selling about 1 million copies, but as the month of December came to an end, the problems began increasing rapidly. And at the end of the month, the stores were filled with unsatisfied customers demanding a refund or exchange. But this wouldn't be the end of Atari's issues. The problems had just only begun. As word began to spread about the game, people were more and more reluctant to buy the game, or as a matter of fact, any game made by Atari, adding fuel to the burning pile of garbage that was Atari's already declining sales figures, was the video game crash of 1983, which many people say was caused by ET itself. During the time frame from 1983 to 1985, home video game sales dropped from about $3.2 billion to about $100 million, a drop of about a staggering 97%. As you can tell, this was not good for Atari. They had basically dug a grave for themselves. As sales tanked, so did profit. Atari had already produced ET in massive numbers even before the game's release, expecting high numbers of sales, and well, at this point we all know how that went. In an attempt to hide the shame that the game brought upon the company, Atari sent the remaining copies of the game, along with many other copies of different games, to be dumped in a landfill in New Mexico. This incident was confirmed in 2014 when the site was dug up. Today, these cartridges, due to their scarcity, sell for a high price, but their worth remains only as a collector's item. Atari were never able to recover from that downfall. In 1984, the home computing and game console department of Atari was sold to Commodore International, and in 1985, the arcade department was sold to Namco Limited. The rest of the company was renamed Atari Games Inc. and would eventually shut down in 2003. Under Commodore, Atari started to work on personal computers and even found success to some degree with its ST line of PCs, but it was nowhere near the past prime of the company. What was once one of the biggest tech giants in the world and the face of the video game industry was now struggling to find any success. and any hopes left for a comeback were killed off in 1993 with the release of the Atari Jaguar. The console was hard to code for and had mediocre performance, making it have less games. They also faced competition from Nintendo, who, in the absence of Atari, had taken the throne in the home video game console market. The Jaguar was released at the same time as the SNES, which was one of Nintendo's most critically acclaimed consoles of all time. The Jaguar sold a measly 125,000 units, further cementing the company as a relic of the past. As of today, Atari still exists, but there's just the shell of the giants that they used to be, focusing on cryptocurrency and video game themed hotels. In conclusion, there could be many games that could be argued to be the worst due to how bad they work on a technical level, but the sheer amount of negative influence ET had on the gaming industry, playing a huge part in the fall of the entire market and being a major reason for sinking the fastest growing company in the entire world, makes it the worst video game of all time. And that is about it. Hope you liked the video. If you did, do leave a like and subscribe to the channel as it helps out a lot. And with that being said, I'll see you in the next one.